John Kiley.
Stan, we're live.
Thank you, Larry, the Liberty Guy. For those of you who are Red Sox fans, you know that sound. That's the famous Red Sox organist from decades past, the famous John Kiley, playing Take Me Out to the Ball Game. Me and our guest, who you'll meet in just a moment, have heard that tune played hundreds, if not thousands of times. Folks, it's baseball season. And what a rotten year last year was between the pandemic and between Red Sox having a pretty off year. So we are very excited to have our guest. But first, in my tradition, so not only it was a no-brainer to choose which cap to wear today in the dugout, and not only going with the Red Sox cap, I'm going with my American League Championship 1986 ring today, too. So we're going to go full Red Sox today. Because it is baseball season. Spring training is underway. Pitchers and catchers and full squads are underway. Major college conferences are practicing. High schools are getting the go-ahead to play. But you know what? Everyone's playing baseball except the Ivy League. And if you saw our show yesterday, what a tragedy, those Brown University baseball players, how angry and upset they were that they're shut down again for the second season. So if you didn't see that video yesterday, right here on rifreedom.org/live, check out that video from yesterday. I call it the tyranny of the Ivy League. So check out that with 6 Brown players. Okay, let's bring on our guest today. I'm very happy to have an old friend, Mr. Dan Duquette, former general manager of the Boston Red Sox. Dan, welcome to In the Dugout.
Glad to be in the dugout, Mike. It's a good time of the year to talk some baseball.
All right. Well, we got a great background picture there, but first things first, you got what cap you going to wear for us today?
Actually, I don't have a cap today. It's a Red Sox day, but I don't have my good Red Sox blue, and so I thought I'd put up the Red Sox background. I do have the green monster.
All right, so explain that. We'll accept the picture instead of a cap. So tell us what that picture is quickly.
Well, this is a picture at Fenway, obviously, a few games ago, probably 2000, maybe just 2001.
Okay.
A few seasons ago. So Harry Dalton, who's from West Springfield, Mass, hired me out of school. I went to work for him in Milwaukee when he was the GM. And Harry always wanted to be the GM of the Red Sox. And Harry didn't get the opportunity to be the GM of the Red Sox, but a couple of his proteges did. Lou Gorman, who I succeeded at the Red Sox, had worked with Harry in Baltimore. He was Harry's farm director. And then, of course, I had worked with Harry in Milwaukee and haven't succeeded Lou. We had a little New England get-together at Fenway Park with our wives, the Gormans, the Daltons, and the Duquettes that night. So
you're from Western Mass. Oh, sorry, Dan.
Yeah,
I'm from Western Mass. You said New England.
But Harry's from Western Mass, and of course Lou's from Rhode Island. So
yes, right.
You're
LaSalle.
Right. So, LaSalle Prep, right? I used to have Lou's LaSalle Prep football team out of my sports camp for about 10 years for preseason training. But anyway, it was an opportunity to get together with the boys at Fenway.
Well, you and I first met in the early 1990s when you were with the Expos, and I was running the fantasy camp for the Expos at the time, which was a great experience. And then you would come over to the Red Sox, 1994, correct?
Right. I came to the Red Sox in 94, just before the strike.
8 years.
Yep. And I was there actively through 2002, through the start of 2002.
Yep. Most recently, you were general manager of the Baltimore Orioles. For the last few years, you've been doing some still involved in baseball. You've got an academy, which obviously was shut down last year, but you also are doing consulting work for some Major League Baseball concerns and other sports, correct?
Yeah, I've been doing my consulting work. We live down the Cape, and been doing some of that. And I've got some clients in professional sports, Major League Baseball, obviously, and then I have some other business clients that I work with.
How long till we see you back in the saddle again as general manager of a big league team?
Well, I mean, that's a tough one. There's only 30 of those jobs. I've had the opportunity to work with some great people and some excellent organizations, and of course, I always wanted to work for the Red Sox, so I got a chance to do that. But hopefully, I'll get another opportunity. I got a lot of energy and have a young family and a lot of obligations. So hopefully, I'll get an opportunity here pretty soon.
Yeah, well, I've always admired your studied and kind of quiet approach towards things, very professional. So good luck with that. All right, let's get into some discussion here. So as a general manager, I'd like your views on the fact that Alex Cora was brought back to the team after being implicated and admitting to some level being involved in the sign stealing scandal, where he, with the Astros, and then of course what happened with the Red Sox. First of all, your views on the scandal, and then as a general manager, what would have been the pros and cons in bringing him back this year?
Well, what they did in Houston went above and beyond, the rules of baseball. I mean, they made it very clear. MLB made it very clear. You're not supposed to use the technology in the dugout to give yourself a competitive advantage over the other team, whether it's sign stealing or however else you use the technology. And what they did in Houston was in fact cheating. I mean, there wasn't any question about it. I mean, they were beyond the pale. They were giving signals in real time. They were using their video and their technology for competitive.
And Alex Cora was a coach on the team at the time, but I don't think he was directly implicated in that sign stealing. Is that correct?
Well, I don't know about that. I
Okay.
didn't see the investigation.
Okay.
He and Beltran evidently were the leaders among the staff and the players. Was my understanding.
Okay.
The Red Sox decided that Alex should take a timeout, sit on the sideline. That they liked the job that he did managing, of course, because he ended up winning the World Series. So they brought him back, which is completely in their purview. But what they did in Houston, that was an embarrassment to the game. And
yeah, and I didn't think what happened in Boston was all that unusual. Did you?
Well, yeah, I don't. What are you referring to, Mike?
I mean, going back and check the videotape after a game, and right. I mean, that's.
Yeah. I don't know how they were using the video in Boston. They had a great year in 2018.
Right.
And the commissioner's office was satisfied with what they found. So, Beltran took a timeout and Alex took a timeout. So Alex is getting another opportunity. But what they did in Houston, that was downright cheating. We went in there for a series when they started the cheating, and we got mashed. Our pitchers gave up
Baltimore.
10
This is Baltimore.
Yeah, our pitchers gave up 10 runs in a 2-game series.
Yeah.
And our guys couldn't figure it out, right? They thought it was the LED lights that they put in. Well, it wasn't the LED lights. They had a competitive advantage. So I'm glad Major League Baseball addressed it. And, it's time to move on from there. Hopefully they'll be able to come up with some solution so it doesn't happen again.
Let's look at current Red Sox. So let's start again with your peer, or, Kyle Bloom. He's been there a couple of years now. Any comments on the challenge he has ahead and how he's performed in trying to restructure the Red Sox?
Well, I mean, the Red Sox had arguably the best season in the history of the franchise in 2018. They led wire to wire. And they had a powerhouse. Well, we faced them in spring training. We couldn't beat them in spring training. They rolled through the spring training schedule. They rolled through the regular season, and they steamrolled the clubs in the playoffs. They clearly had the best team. And Dave Dombrowski and Tony La Russa and Alex Cora, they had a great year. But the Red Sox find themselves in a rebuild very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly.
Very quickly after having one of the best teams in the history of the franchise. You know, they jettisoned a number of key players off the roster. They had some injuries, and so now they're in a rebuild. You know, I mean,
hold on. Before we look forward, was that a case of, listen, we know we've got a short window to win, so let's load up our salaries. Let's load up our players. We know we can't keep them for many years. Was it, you know, do you think that was the strategy in 2018?
Well, I think that was a strategy when they hired Dave Dombrowski to come in. You know, they told them they wanted to get back into a proud position. And Dave knew they had a good farm system, and he leveraged that farm system to make some trades to strengthen the ball club. And he produced a top-notch ball club for the Red Sox in 2018. And you know, Dave wanted to come in and win the World Series and win a pennant to solidify his record. He had won a World Series in the National League with the Marlins, and if he could come to the American League and win a pennant there, he'd be able to solidify his case to get into the Hall of Fame. The last two GMs that have gotten into the Hall of Fame, Pat Gillick and John Schuerholz, they both had championship clubs in both the American League and the National League on their revenue. I think that was Dave's ambition when he came here, and he succeeded it. I don't know what their plan was
right
for beyond 2018, but clearly they wanted to win, and the Red Sox did that.
But he left. But it appears he left Bloom, current general manager Bloom, with quite a mess.
Well, Dave made a great trade when he left Detroit to come to Boston, because Ben Cherington and his staff, they did a good job in player development, and they left him some very good young players on the roster. You know, some who led the team to the championship, and others that Dave traded to get the pieces that he needed to win again. So, you know, you know, the name of the game is to win. The name of the game is to win and have a championship. I mean, we're not going to complain in New England or Boston about winning a World Series championship, but you know, how you're going to go about your business after that, you know, that's another story. I think the fans have enjoyed watching the Red Sox win the championships.
Yeah.
The Red Sox won 4 championships
2004,
in the last 20 years or 17 years.
Yeah, 17.
4 World Series after a drought of 85 years.
Pretty good run. Yep.
So you know, the fans don't have anything to complain about, but having enjoyed you know, the status and the stature of a championship team, you know, that's a tough pill to swallow. So,
Yeah.
so
I'll tell you one thing.
Now the Red Sox, you know, they have some work to do. I mean, they've got some work to do to get back in the first division.
I'll tell you one thing I particularly enjoyed, and I don't know, let's see how well you know him, but you know, my former minor league roommate Terry Francona, you know, had the honor of winning that first championship. Tito and I were really good friends back in the days, teammates for many years together. So that was especially enjoyable for me. All right. So how do you, I'm sure you follow most of the teams as a general manager. How do you handicap the Red Sox outlook for this upcoming season?
Well, you know, the Red Sox had, probably the worst pitching staff of my lifetime last season.
I never heard of any of those guys.
So, you know, the Red Sox got a lot of work to do. You know, that there's a lot of sins you can recover from, but having a poor pitching staff and not very good starting pitching is not one of those sins that you can overcome. So I'm sure the Red Sox understand that they're going to have to put a lot of time, energy, and resources into building their pitching staff to get back into the first division.
And they have added some pieces in Richards and Ottavino and the Japanese player Sawamura, and of course Eduardo Rodriguez is back, and maybe Chris Sale mid-year. But I want to go back to one thing that I thought was the biggest sin. I mean, after they win the World Championship in 2018, you go into the next 2 years and what has become a staple of all teams, they don't have a closer. There is no, how are you the world champions and you don't even have a closer the next year?
Yeah, well, I'm, I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, if you want to have a championship team, you need a closer. If you don't have a very good team, you don't need a closer. So maybe the Red Sox knew something that we didn't know. But those two left-handed pitchers you just talked about, Sale and Eduardo Rodriguez, they have the pitches, they have the talent. They could certainly come back and help stabilize that ball club and get them back into a competitive position. Beyond that, I think you're going to have to find out who else can give you the innings with the quality, stuff that, those two guys have.
Let me ask you about Chris Sale. Obviously, he's the biggest name on the staff, one of the biggest names in the whole league. You've been general manager many, many, many years. You've seen many Tommy John injuries, and surgeries like Chris Sale has. How much can the Red Sox expect that if he comes back around midseason that he can be effective? What's your experience with pitchers who have undergone that?
Well, he had the surgery last fall. Or last August, right?
Yeah, last summer, yeah.
Yeah, last summer. So usually it takes 12 to 14 months for the players to come back.
Or was it earlier? Did he have it right after spring training, I think?
Yeah, he might have had it right after spring training. But, I think you have to look at 12 to 14 months. General recovery time from there. I would be looking for Sale to be back to form for the 2022 season. I don't know all the particulars of his injury or where he is on his program, but generally, it takes 12 to 24 months, and
to get back to peak, right? To get back.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking about one of the elite pitchers in the league.
He might pitch this year, but probably not at peak, right? Because of what you're saying.
Well, yeah. I mean, he's had some time off, and the throwing program and the stress that it puts on other areas of your body, the rehab, they're all grueling. I'm sure he's done a lot of his work, and I'm sure he wants to come back and pitch. But that's going to take a little time.
All right. The other big name that's no longer there, of course, is Mookie Betts, MVP. And I'm not asking you to be critique necessarily, but how would you evaluate that trade with the Dodgers that sent Betts away, and now all three Bs in the outfield appear to be gone? Bradley could resign, Bradley, Benintendi, and Betts, but Betts being the big name. How would you evaluate that trade for both teams?
Well, one of the reasons the Red Sox had such a great year in 2018 is because when you have those outfielders, they can cover the ground like Betts, Benintendi, and JBJ. That makes your pitching staff really good, right? And you had a couple of left-handed hitters and arguably one of the most talented players in the history of the club in Betts in that outfield. If you remember, JBJ got into the playoffs. He was hitting for power, right?
Yeah.
And whenever you got your center fielder hitting home runs, particularly in playoff games, you're in business. And then, Benintendi's no slouch. He was the 7th player taken in the draft. And then, Mookie Betts, arguably, one of the best and most complete players the Red Sox have ever had. So, that you take away that outfield.
But the Red Sox said they couldn't afford him. I mean, as a GM, how would you respond to that?
This is the Red Sox. I'm sure the Red Sox could afford him. Whether they wanted to pay him that kind of money, that's a choice.
Okay.
But I'm sure the Red Sox.
So you wouldn't. So it sounds
the
like
Red Sox can afford the very best players. I mean, come on. We all grew up here in New England.
I know.
We know what it costs to go to a Red Sox game and what kind of product they've been.
How much a hot dog costs? Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
so the Red Sox could afford him. It's a question whether they wanted to pay him that money or not. They must have seen some risk associated with that type of long-term commitment that they weren't comfortable with.
So let me ask you this, Dan, because I've always been curious. So obviously, when you're talking about paying a player as much as Mookie Betts would command, it's not just the general manager's decision. There's ownership who are involved, who have to decide whether they're gonna shell out the money, right? So how does that dynamic really work in the real world? Obviously as a general manager, you want to keep Betts, right? Because he's a great player. But as an owner, like you said, they may not want to pay that much. How does that normally, that interaction on big questions like this, like a guy with Betts, and ultimately it sounded like ownership won? Or do you think the Red Sox, as a GM, said, we're going to end up better off in 2 or 3 years by trading him, but with the players we're going to get back? So how would you put all that together so it makes sense to Red Sox fans?
Well, the owners can earmark their resources in whatever direction they want to, based upon how they make their investments or how they want to manage their club. So most of these large investment decisions regarding players, certainly at that level, the owners are involved in. So what's the idea that you had a top-notch player and you didn't want to sign them for that period. I don't know what their long-term plan is. Certainly Mookie Betts has some good years in front of him because the Dodgers picked him up and signed him to a contract.
Look what he did for them. Yep.
Yeah.
What he did for the Red Sox.
I don't know if the Red Sox looked at their roster and they may have said, well, we don't know that we can, keep this roster together. We don't know that, where we're going to go with our team and our roster, for our next, championship cycle. And, these things are cyclical. The challenge for the teams, when you pay one player a significant portion of your resources, you're still confronted with the question of where are you going to get the resources to get all those other pieces that you need to surround that player, to have a championship team. And we all know you don't win unless you have a complete roster, right? You need the pitchers, you need the defense, you need the speed, you need the hitters, you need the closer, which you alluded to. So I don't know what their overall thinking was.
All right. But it sounds like as GM,
but you need all those things.
So inclined to trade him if it was up to you.
Well, I mean, Mookie Betts is the kind of player that comes along about once in a generation.
Okay? I know I can't put you on the spot with one of your colleagues.
Well, we had the same issue with Manny Machado. Okay, Manny Machado in Baltimore. We tried to sign him to a long-term deal before he was a free agent. We didn't get a long-term deal. But we had this discussion ourselves in the front office. Manny Machado is the type of talent that comes along about once every 35 years. And Manny had the credentials. He was the player of the year, the defensive player of the year. He put together offensive numbers that hadn't been seen in the Oriole organization since Cal Ripken and Eddie Murray. Okay. So he's a rarefied company. We didn't get him signed. Our team fell out of contention, and the club made the decision to trade Manny Machado to the Dodgers, interestingly enough.
Just from an on-field perspective, do you think if Machado had stayed with you in the Orioles, your team would have been more in contention?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, Manny's a core player and great defensive player, very gifted player. Red Sox fans got a chance to see a lot of Manny. But, whether we would have had enough resources to sign Manny and then put together the other pieces around him to compete in the American League East, that's a whole nother story. But, teams are confronted with this. And, at the end of the day, it takes, it takes a lot of good players to win a championship, which Mike. And, the timing and the cyclical nature of having your roster mature at the same time and having all the players there at the same time, that's a tough one. There's so many things that are happening at the same time.
You mentioned Bradley. I want to talk about the other B we didn't talk too much about yet, and that's Benintendi. Now, I've always been puzzled by him. I want to get your take as a talent evaluator. Now, I thought it was very unfair that early on, once he started to show early on in his, I don't know if it was his rookie year or early in his next year, when he started to really put some hits together, that they automatically said he's the next Carl Yastrzemski. I mean, I mean, a guy like Carl, you said 35 years for a guy like Machado. A guy like Yastrzemski comes around once every 50 years. I thought that was pretty unfair to Benintendi. I got to admit, I was never right from the get-go. I didn't like Andrew's swing so much. He was smaller than I thought, and had a pretty big swing. And, and he's had some up and down, most recently down. Do you think he's going to do better over in Kansas City?
Well, do I think he's going to do better in Kansas City than he did for Boston in 2020? I think the answer to that is yes.
Yeah.
Okay. He had a bad year last year.
Yeah.
He had a bad year. I don't know the circumstances. He has the talent, being drafted number 7 in the country by the Red Sox and performing the way he's performed and putting up the numbers that he did in the big leagues prior to this past season. I got to believe that he's going to revert to the norm of the performance that he established for himself with Kansas City. I mean, they said Trot Nixon was going to be a Carl Yastrzemski. Every left-handed hitting outfielder that comes up there gets compared to the great Yaz.
Right.
So that's inevitable. Is it fair to the player? Probably not. But I like Benintendi. Like you alluded to it, his swing's a little bit long and complicated. But he has talent.
Yeah, he showed
he's a 5-tool player.
Put the bat on the ball during the hot streak in his second year. I mean, it was incredible. We just put the meat of the bat on the ball all the time. All right, let's move on to our Red Sox hero, who recently announced his retirement. I don't know how well you got to know him, but Dustin Pedroia, any thoughts on his career with the Red Sox?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, Dustin, one of the top 2 second basemen in the history of the organization, right? It's either Bobby Doerr or Dustin Pedroia.
Wow. Okay. You put him that high. Yeah. Okay.
If you look in the book, they got about the same WAR over the course of their career. It's unfortunate the way Dustin's career ended with the injuries that he had. I was reading Darren Cicchini's tribute to Dustin on Twitter, and he was talking about the time they flew all night. They got to San Francisco. He went down for breakfast in the morning. It was 9:00. And he saw Pedroia in the lobby, and he said, "Cheech, come on, let's go." And he goes, "Where are we going?" He goes, "This is the big leagues. We're going to the ballpark. We're getting ready to win tonight." Well, isn't that the kind of ball player you want on your team, right?
That's right.
This is the big leagues, buddy.
That's
We're gonna go to the ballpark, and we're gonna prepare to win the game tonight. So that kind of leadership, that kind of grind, that kind of enthusiasm,
You know,
is what made Pedroia a great player. I mean, he had all the skills, but how about that kind of drive?
you know who that reminds me of what you just said, and I wouldn't have thought of it until you just said that. But a guy I played with, who was like that times 10 was Pete Rose. He played with me in the Expos in 1984. We became very good friends. He really liked me. Kept saying I want to hang around Harvard guys and make me smarter. He's on ABC Sports with Howard Cosell saying that. He said that on national TV.
Yeah, well, he should have spent more time with you.
I know. I would have advised him against gambling, yes, for sure. But he was like that. In fact, he was so smart. I'll never forget one day, Dan, he said to me, he's Stenny, was my nickname. Say, Stenny, are you paying attention to the schedule? I go, what do you mean? Now he's got his own career to worry about, but he goes, listen, you're sort of a spot player, lefty hitter. He goes, I'm looking at the rotation of the next two series, that against the Dodgers and, whoever else we're playing and the Cardinals. And, there's going to be, righty pitchers on next Thursday, next Saturday, next Monday. Have you been studying those pitchers? I'm like, Jesus, no. I mean, so he's thinking of me, and that's the kind of mind he had. You talk about preparing to play. What other players prepared in that way? You mentioned Pedroia, I mentioned Rose. Who else comes to mind like that for you?
Well, I have this player development class, and we just did a recent study on Henry Aaron, and we studied Henry Aaron's preparation for pitchers prior to the series, and he talked about how he prepared for the next day's pitcher the night before, how he would go back and see in his mind's eye his at-bats against that pitcher, and he would have an idea as to what that pitcher was going to throw him and what his fastball looked like, what his breaking ball looked like, how likely he was to see a changeup from him. And he would rehearse at night for the next starting pitcher. So he
physically rehearse?
He was rehearsing his mind's eye. He said you'd see it in your mind's eye. So he said, like,
visualization. Yeah.
Right. Visualization. Like if I'm going to see Don Drysdale, I know his fastball moves a lot differently than Sandy Koufax. Sandy Koufax is going to be up in the strike zone.
Yeah.
I know I have to make an adjustment, if I'm going to be facing Drysdale.
Kind of like playing a video game, seeing that screen, but doing it in your mind, right? Seeing that.
Exactly. And then, when he got to the ballpark, he would think about it. So when he went up there, he knew what pitch he was going to be looking for and what situation he'd be looking for. So he had already rehearsed in his mind what he wanted to do. Now, this is a power hitter that hit 300 over the course of his career. He didn't do it. He didn't do it by accident. Okay. If he was saying how if he didn't do that, he could have been a 270 hitter. But if he wanted to be a really good hitter and be the kind of hitter that he expected himself to be, he had to go through this kind of preparation. And then so the question was, like, Henry, how do you prepare for pitchers that you had trouble hitting? He said, well, so what I would do, he goes, I would sharpen my focus, and he goes, I would look at them through the air hole in my hat so that I could really focus on their delivery and see if there was anything that I could pick up that would help me in my next at bat. So, I mean, that's a kind of mental approach and learned skills that these elite athletes like Pedroia are talking about.
That's funny. My dad taught, as any of our viewers know, my dad pitched in the big leagues, and he taught me a lot, even though I was a hitter. But he used to teach me that, just look for your hand like that, focus on the pitcher and see if you can pick something up in his delivery, that shuts out everything else in the background and see if there's a difference the way he throws his curve or his fastball or his grip on his changeup or something. So I used to do that. I used to sit in the dugout and do that. Look at guys just like that. That's funny you bring that up. All right, last question, Dan. And I thank you for your time. So non-Red Sox stuff. You were involved in helping a baseball league. Was it a professional league? Get started in the country of Israel.
Yeah, we started up the Israel Baseball League. I think it was in 2008.
Pro or amateur?
It was a professional league. It
was.
was structured along the lines of U.S. independent baseball, and we started out at my sports academy with tryouts, and we got kids that came from all over the world to try out. We had kids from Australia come. We had kids from Israel. We had a lot of Jewish kids that had played college ball in the States that wanted to play over in Israel. And in 2008, we ended up having 4 teams. We ended up having a good season. A lot of challenges.
Sure.
To just finding
Security,
facilities. But anyway, long story short, one of our goals when we started the project was to get Israel established as an international baseball team, which we've done. If you followed them, they had a pretty good World Baseball Classic. They ended up beating the John Scopes team there from Curacao.
Right.
They beat them, and Jerry Weinstein, who was the manager of the Wareham team in the Cape League, he was the manager there. But anyway, Israel this past season qualified for the Olympics, which is absolutely huge, right? They haven't had a they qualified for the Olympics, and they're going to train and play in Japan.
Well, that's got to make you feel proud.
Yeah, in the next Olympics. And one of the players that came to the original tryout at my camp was a guy named Eric Holtz. And Eric Holtz is now the manager of that Team Israel that is going to be representing Israel in the upcoming Olympics this summer in Japan. So that was I was really happy for those guys, but I was proud that we had made some progress on that initiative.
That's cool. Well, I want to ask you this. One of the first great, I don't know if he was the first great Jewish big leaguer was Hank Greenberg.
Have you seen Hank Greenberg swing on YouTube? What an unbelievable power swing that guy has.
Kind of like a Dave Kingman kind of swing, huh?
Wasn't it? Man, but he could make more contact than Kingman. Yeah. But I didn't know too much about him. But just last, I don't know, a couple of months ago, I started looking up Hank Greenberg. I went back and found some video on YouTube, and I was just so impressed with that guy's swing, man.
Yeah, I just saw it the other night. I always, whenever I see it on TV, Ken Burns' baseball, that great documentary. And then just the other night, they had about a 10-minute piece on Greenberg and how important he was to the Jewish community across America. Well, Dan Duquette, you're involved in youth sports and coaching now and training, and you've had a fabulous big league career. And we hope it continues. We'd love to see you back as a GM. And I really thank you for being on with us today on In the Dugout.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mike. I enjoyed talking baseball with you.
Let's do it. Can we do it again sometime?
Yeah, sure.
All right, let's do that. Yep. Thank you, Dan. All right, folks, I think we're going to keep this as a baseball only show today. So we'll end our In the Dugout in just a minute today. I don't think it would make sense to go into some political commentary like I was original planning. But I do want to remind you that if you haven't seen my interview on yesterday's show, whatever date that was, February 24th, with the Brown University baseball players, I think it's entitled Ivy League Tyranny. Watch that. I think it was my most compelling commentary to date. And the interview with the Brown players was really interesting. So I urge you to watch that. So we're going to talk baseball every now and then on In the Dugout. I know it's a political show, but every now and then we got to keep up to what our name is about and talk a little baseball and see if the Red Sox can come back. And we'll be looking for some other guests to have on periodically. And again, I want to thank Dan Duquette, and I want to thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next game.